I want you to change the way you think about obstacles. You know, so many of us think of obstacles as impediments to making progress, things holding us back, things that are keeping us from fulfilling what we want for ourselves and for our communities and others. And actually, obstacles can work for you as accelerators of progress, not only for you, but for your community and for your organization. So let's look at how that can happen. Because this is a critical insight that I gained from Silicon Valley and working with entrepreneurs starting new ventures, and also with, frankly, interesting and engaging entrepreneurs in the social sector. They're people who see obstacles, and in seeing the obstacles, they see opportunities. And that's the critical thing here, is how to make that shift. Because if you think about it, you know, using skiing as an analogy, if you're skiing down a hill and there were no moguls and there was no obstacles, nothing that you had to navigate around, there'd be nothing to really demonstrate your talent, nothing that you could really build skills around. If you just shot down the hill, you'd be going back up the chairlift. But it's the moguls, it's the obstacles, it's the things that we encounter and how we choose to respond to them that really define our talent story and help us to create exciting chapters for ourselves. Because after all, what's a hero story? A hero story is not just about somebody who has great ideas, wonderful hopes, and then just goes about merrily to accomplish them. They're people who encounter obstacles. And if they didn't encounter obstacles, have that struggle, there would be no excitement in the story. It would just be pretty bland and flat, and you wouldn't even bother to read it. So let's make your story an exciting story. Let's make yours one of how you can really accelerate through obstacles, see them as opportunities, and to be able to move forward. Now, in the participant guide, we provided a diagnostic that lists 15 common obstacles that we see people in local government, in for-profit enterprises, and others encounter. And for each of those, we've identified a particular tool, targeted and proven to be effective in helping to address that obstacle. And what I want to do in this video with you is to highlight a few of them with you, to help you see how to put these into practice and what are some of the common ways that people have found value out of this to help them actually accelerate through the obstacles. One of the ones, and you heard it discussed in the conversation with Jill on her Talent Catalyst conversation, was really about inner qualities. You know, we so often focus on what we're going to do, all the doings, if you will, of our life and of our projects and of our organization. And we often forget to think about how we need to be in order to get those things done. Because after all, we're human beings, so we have to be thinking about how do we need to be in order to get things accomplished. And that's where inner qualities come into play. So I invite you to take a look at the exercise in the participant guide around inner qualities. What are the inner qualities that you have to help you and support you in going forward with your career? What are the inner qualities you'd like to develop? You may remember that Jill was highlighting in her discussion, gosh, a critical thing for her is really persistence. If she could boost her persistence in following up on her intentions, she could really accelerate to her results very effectively. And then the third column in that exercise is to look at, well, what inner qualities do you want to tap or get support from other people? We don't have to have all the inner qualities ourselves. In fact, sometimes we beat ourselves up for who we're not, rather than thinking about who we are. Yes, you want to be developing your inner qualities. Yes, you want to be strengthening yourself. It's sort of like a muscle. You want to get stronger. And you also want to acknowledge which muscles you have and which ones you don't, and how far you can go with them. So for example, if you're an introvert, and therefore you're not somebody who's very strong at putting forward your ideas, and yet you want to get a major project done, well, how about pulling a lifeline into a friend or a colleague who is an extrovert, who is great at rallying people together and say, hey, I'd like to accomplish these results. I'm looking to achieve this benefit for our community. Can you help in getting this message across? So you see simple ways you can be thinking strategically about your inner qualities and how to put them into place. So that's one example of the 15 different tools. Another tool that you can have fun with is what we call the 100 Resource Challenge. Because what we've found is that people have many more resources than they may be initially aware of, and certainly far fewer that they're making active use of. So this is a way for you to be identifying those resources and helping you get there. Now, why do we call it the 100 Resource Challenge? Well, it's because if you identify some objective you'd like to achieve, something you'd like to develop in your current job, some new position you're interested in or whatever, and you start listing down the resources that you have and the resources that you might access, and if you get that list to 100, our experience is that by the time you get to 100, you will have accomplished your objective because you will have realized all the things that can help you get to where you want to be. Even if you're starting off and thinking, geez, I don't know if I have any resources to help me. I don't know if I have any budget. I don't know if there's anything that's going to get me there. Follow this 100 Resource Challenge and it'll help you accomplish that result. Now that's one part of it, just listing those. And it's been fun as I've done workshops with people, and usually I do a workshop on one of each of the 3 keys over a 3 to 6 month period. So I get to see people over time developing their talent, and it's a fun thing for them and for me to observe. They'll run up to me and say, hey, look, I'm now at resource number 89. And then somebody who's next to them will say, hey, yeah, but did you include thus and such? And people add to those resources. So it's a fun way for you to enjoy the process of building your resourcefulness for the next stage of your career. But beyond just identifying resources, there's the critical need to make greater and more effective use of them. So we ask people for each of those resources, or for the major ones that you think would be helpful to you in accomplishing what you'd like, what percentage of that resource are you actually tapping? Oftentimes we find people listing, 20, 30%, or maybe not even having access to that resource at all. So gosh, there's a huge opportunity there that they can be building on it more fully. So we invite you in the participant guide to write down what you could do to be tapping those resources more effectively. This is where I see many people getting hung up, because they identify the resources, but then they don't know, well, how can I get them? How can I talk with people and not sound needy? How can I get something from somebody that doesn't report to me, has no particular reason to be supportive of me? How can I do that effectively? So one of the additional tools that's written up in the book, Take Charge of Your Talent, but isn't in the participant guide. So again, in the spirit of freely and easily making these accessible to you, it's available as a PDF on the website, is the tool of making effective requests of others. How you can identify your intention in a way that creates a bridge with the other person, so motivates them to be interested. How you can very concretely provide observations that identify what's needed and what the circumstances are, and how you can make a simple request that's effective in getting a response, and then how you can reconfirm with them the agreement that you've reached. Simple tool, worked phenomenally well for city managers, department heads, CEOs of companies, as an effective way to make requests of others. And frankly, in your career as you advance, that's a critical thing. You're going to be making requests of more and more people, not less. Usually the idea is, hey, we get to the top of the pyramid and we just ask for what we want. The reality is the people who are at the top of the pyramid have to work across organizations, across communities, and rarely have the ability to direct anybody to do anything. On the most important things they're trying to get done, it's really learning the skill, exercising the tool of how to make effective requests of others. This brings us to another tool, which is the Talent Action Plan, TAP, or we call TAP it. How can you translate the ideas coming out of key number 1, the actions that you were thinking of taking, the direction that you're interested in going, the approaches you're going to take to overcome obstacles? How can you translate that into a plan that's really going to get traction? You'll recall that one of the things that was very motivating to Jill in her Talent Catalyst conversation at the end was really saying, hey, I want to develop a plan. So how do you do that? How do you get that done? And this is a critically valuable item. So we've included in the participant guide an 8-step set of items that are essentially questions. What are you hoping to accomplish? What needs to be done? How do you see doing it? Who needs to be involved? What resources are required, et cetera, et cetera. Simple questions that will very quickly and powerfully get you to a plan. Now, there's a couple approaches you could take to this. You could sit down by yourself and write out your plan. And maybe for some of you, that's the best way to do it. Frankly, we found, however, that it's extremely more powerful and more effective for you to do this with somebody else. Now you can do this with a volunteer coach, where the volunteer coach is asking you the questions in the plan and then jotting down your answers and responses, maybe helping you augment the ideas with your permission as you see appropriate. Or it could be a colleague, a coworker, a friend, a family member, whomever. But we found that whereas people could take a couple hours to write out their plan, in the course of about 20 minutes with somebody asking them these questions, they can knock out a plan that probably has more energy, more robustness to it because they've done it with somebody else. They've gotten that powerful, generous listening of somebody else working to their benefit. So as you can see, as we move through the keys, there are coaching opportunities at each stage. As you've been listening through this, you're probably thinking, well, this all sounds nice, but my biggest obstacle is I just don't have time. So I want to close by going to that one. And again, that's one that's described in the book, but it isn't in the participant guide. So again, I'm providing you a PDF about it. But how to slice through overwhelming workloads. And what I've learned about that is some interesting insights from surgeons, the top surgeons in the world that I've had the opportunity to work with in some of the companies that I've started and in other circumstances, and to observe how do they get so much done? How do they really go to the top of their field and do it so effectively? Well, surgeons do it by being very clear in how they manage and work with their time. They focus on their surgeries, the highest and best use of their talent, with laser-like focus. Everything else is excluded. They don't take emails or conference calls or multitask because they've got to zero in and focus on their surgeries. Because after all, this is a life or death situation and they're accountable for it. Now you may say, okay, that's nice for surgeons. They can have those surgery times and their office hours in the afternoon and that all works for them, but they're surgeons and hey, I'm in local government and I can't pull that off. Well, yes, you can. And let me explain to you how. If you think about your work week and identify, what are your most productive times, your most creative times in that course of that work week? Not, when do you work on creative projects, which might be late at night after the kids are in bed or whatever else, but actually, when are you the most creative? And if you think of those times as your surgery times and focus in on, okay, how can you, in those times when you're the most productive, the most creative, the most effective, go about doing the most important projects that you have in your job, or exploring how to develop your talent more fully, both of which are critically important. And while they're not life or death, in a way they're the life or death of your talent. And only you can make the choices to decide if you're going to give greater life and energy to your talent or if you're going to let it die on the vine. And then, of course, what you need to do, and this is spelled out in the exercise, I won't go into a lot of detail, but is you need to do what the surgeons do, is that is figure out, okay, how they're going to deal with everything else on their plate. How are they going to make sure that they're available to people that need to contact them? How are they going to inform and work with other people that they need to, and not all of whom report to them, some of whom may be outside their organization, to be prepared and be knowledgeable that, okay, this person's working on their particular critical tasks at these times, and how have they prepared others so they can handle it? The great thing that happens if you're willing to do this is that you'll actually not only benefit yourself and your talent, you'll be benefiting your organization and the community by what you create from that talent, but you'll also be helping others in your organization get organized themselves. Because if people realize that, okay, I'm not going to be able to reach Don in the morning on Wednesday because he's working on a critical project, then if they've got something that they need to do that they need my input on, they'll be thinking about it the day before and reaching me beforehand, which means that they're starting to organize their work. They're starting to organize their surgeries in a more effective way rather than saying, oh, well, Don's always available. He's got an open door policy. I'll just not, barge in anytime I want, and I don't need to be organized. So do you see how actually being selfish in a way, self with a big S, meaning self is being of value to others, is actually a way to be of value to your organization and to the profession. So again, as you're thinking about accelerating through obstacles, I hope you'll do what I encourage people to do in the workshops that we have, when you encounter an obstacle, is to say, oh, how fascinating. What can I do with this obstacle? How can this be an opportunity for us to express our talents more effectively, find new solutions, and to leapfrog from where we are to what are better opportunities? Oftentimes you'll find with that approach, you'll engage your better thinking, you'll come up with new solutions. You may find ways that instead of slogging through, you can actually leap forward and get more successful results more quickly. And that's what I want for you when you accelerate through obstacles.